beat veteran Roscoe Turner doing more than 280.5 miles an hour. The third time that Roscoe has won the Thompson Trophy.
The wind here, still as it was early, may have dropped a little bit, but Yoshi making time for himself.
Have you noticed that when you search air racing into YouTube, the only thing that comes up are GTA gaming videos? How did we? No, don't leave. I'm going to show you how we got there. All right, so first things first, we need to go back to when airplanes were, first made. 1903, Wright brothers, they flew an airplane. Okay, but in 1909, people wanted to start racing them. 4 brave pilots took off in Paris, France, and they decided they wanted to see who could get over the finish line first. Yeah, anyway, nobody finished because airplanes sucked, and well, we're off to a great start. But as airplanes kept getting better, people kept wanting to see who could be the fastest in them. And by the 1920s, there were 2 major ways to race. The Schneider Trophy, which was for seaplanes, and the Pulitzer Trophy, which was for not seaplanes. Ooh, that was bad. Over-the-ground planes. By 1925, the U.S. Army and U.S. Navy decided that they wanted to get involved into these races. They were like, hey, this would be a great way to get people interested in flying airplanes to kill each other. So what's the worst thing that could happen? Let's get some people interested in flying and fund these races. So from 1925 onward, the U.S. Army, Navy, and a bunch of corporations sponsored these air races, and they continued to grow, and more of them happened. By 1930, people were very interested in air racing. It took up entire pages of newspaper. Okay, I need to set this down because it's really old and really brittle. I just ripped it. And air racers kept improving. In 1931, a very famous airplane was unveiled, the GBR-1 and R2, designed by 2 guys who didn't have any money and wanted to win money by air racing. Anyway, they were really fast, like really fast. And they were also just a teensy-weensy bit dangerous. Spoiler alert. Every single one of them crashed and a bunch of people died flying them. Okay, anywho, air racing continued through the 1930s, and there was this lady who liked to fly airplanes fast. Her name was Amelia something, and then there was this guy named Howard. He wanted to make his airplane go faster than everybody else, so in 1935 or something, he built a really cool airplane. But air racing continued until 1940, and by 1940, air racing was huge. Everybody was interested in it, but it was just a teensy-weensy bit dangerous. In 1940, a bunch of countries had to pull out because they were busy getting, invaded. And we also went to war, a little bit later. And when we went to war, all of our fast air racing pilots were either flying for the United States military, like Jimmy Doolittle, who led a raid and did a thing, or they died in the war like a bunch of other people. Yikes. Ooh. Anyway, in 1946, the air races came back. Yeah, that's right. They came back after the war because air racing was cool again. And this time they were flying modified World War II aircraft, surplus airplanes that the military didn't have any use for. And once again, air racing was huge. But even in the 1940s, it was pretty well known that the jet age was soon to be upon them. As this brochure from the 1949 air race shows, jets were on the horizon, and jets were a big deal. People thought jets would be air racing. Oh, there'd be a new jet class. But it turns out flying jets is really expensive, and because the Cold War kicked off between the United States and Russia, military powers were dueling it out for who could be the best with the jets. Regular people couldn't afford that, but the government could afford to fly faster, higher, and further, which meant that the new famous people weren't exactly the civilians hopping in their little airplanes going, I'm gonna go fast around the country, and more or less steely-eyed missile men like Chuck Yeager, who were flying across a freaking sound barrier and going to the moon. Chuck Yeager didn't go to the moon. Anyway, air racing continued into the actually, it didn't. Air racing didn't continue into the 1950s, and this is most what killed air racing. In 1949, there was a major crash that killed 3 people, and that brought about a 13-year hiatus to air racing. But by the 1960s, air racing had resumed, this time moved to Reno, Nevada. Once again, they were still flying these old World War II airplanes because they couldn't afford the jets. And because of government regulation preventing buying military jets and preventing people from going supersonic over houses, that never really happened. Supersonic racing just didn't happen. So the air races remained mostly the same. And through the 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s, they faded. But in 2003, a new dawn was on the horizon. The GBR-1 had flown again. Well, not actually the GBR-1. This was a replica because, once again, all of them crashed A commercial spacecraft had just flown. And Red Bull, the awesome energy drink corporation, who didn't sponsor me because we're not sponsored. By the way, hit the subscribe button because we're not making any money off of this. They were very interested in getting an air race going. So in 2003, the Red Bull World Air Races started. It was a world championship of air racing featuring pylon races going really fast with the best pilots from around the world, just like the air racing of the old days. Air racing was back. Except it wasn't. People never really cared because as fast as an airplane, you know, a propeller airplane can go, a supersonic jet can always go faster. And we've gone as high as we're going to go in Earth. We have now left Earth and gone beyond. Air racing isn't the frontier anymore. It's cool. It's real cool. But it's not the frontier. And in 2011 at the National Air Races in Reno, there was a terrible crash.
Okay, folks.
A P-51 slammed into the stands, killed 11 people, and injured another 69. Not nice. This was the end of air racing for a lot of spectators, because with the idea that they could be killed simply by watching, they weren't really interested in growing. And air racing's return was not much of a return anymore. Now, throughout the 2010s, air racing has continued mostly in Reno. There are a few other races, but Reno is the biggest. And it's possible that there's a new Formula Jet experimental jet class coming out, but I'm not qualified to talk about it. But for the Red Bull Air Races, the clock was already ticking, because in 2019, Red Bull hosted its last World Championship. And with that, the Red Bull Air Race, the last real major shot at air racing becoming popular, disappeared. Now, Reno still happens every year, which is the National Air Races, which was in Cleveland, that moved to Reno. But we don't know how long that's going to keep going, because that depends on sponsorships and interest. So if you have the opportunity to go and to check it out, be sure to do it, because there's a decent chance that it may be our only opportunity to see an old school air race. Now, that's not saying aviation's dead. Okay, we got other places to compete. There's two billionaires who are dueling it out for control of space to see who can go the furthest, who can get to Mars first. And also, we might have air races on freaking Mars. I mean, who knows? The future is yours. But for now, go check out an air race. Go have fun. Enjoy aviation. And while you're enjoying aviation, slap that subscribe button, because we don't have any other way to grow and any other way to gain any following whatsoever. Yeah, so anyway, I'm your host, George. I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit that subscribe button and maybe like this video, because we aren't monetized. We aren't going to grow. And if you would be so inclined, do share us with a couple of friends. Have a wonderful day.